Well, welcome back to another episode of the Threshold Lab, and we're going to continue our interview seasons and our conversations on the inner game of coaching. And I'm really excited to introduce today's guest, Kevin Eastman, who's joining the show. And Kevin and I met a few years ago now. I still remember sitting down for coffee and chatting with you and learning a little bit about not just your background, but just your perspective on coaching and leadership, and I very much appreciated what I pulled from you was this emphasis on practicality and simplicity, and you've been one of the best that I've seen that's been able to blend that combo. So, Kevin, I'm super excited that you're willing to join me today, and thank you for being here.
No, my pleasure. I think what you're doing here with this particular series of people that you're talking to, it's the ability for all of us, because I'm going to start listening to all the other interviews that you have, to just learn from other people who've kind of been through it. There's those who talk on theory. There's those who talk about, well, I think this is the way it is, and then there's those who have actually sweated and been in the competition. So I think what you're doing is tremendous. And if I can shed a little bit of if some ideas or some strategies, then great, this is going to be time well spent. But you mentioned something that I think is really important, and it's kind of a philosophy that I've had almost my entire professional career, over almost 5 decades now, and that is kind of a mantra that I've lived by, and it goes like this: success lies in the simplicity, confusion lives in the sophistication. And there's so much coming at us in today's world, so much clutter, so much noise, whether that be in our sport or just coming from home or from our kids' lives, whatever the case may be, that if you can put time into trying to simplify the things that you do, the things that you say, the things that you believe in, especially if you're a leader or a coach, the more sophisticated, the more they're apt to have to think. The more they think, they don't react. The more they don't react, that play has gone by. Or in your world, that grounder has kind of passed me, right? So I'm looking forward to it. I have no idea where this is going to go today, but I'm willing to try and keep up with you.
Well, I'm so appreciative of you being open and flexible, and I love that sentiment. I think I've even heard this from you about, the difference between communicating in the form of, bullet points versus paragraphs, right? And I think that speaks to what you described there, and the beauty of simplicity, and how when we expand our vocabulary and use more words, how that often leads to the confusion for those that we're leading. And I know we'll probably dive into that a little bit more when we talk about how you wanted those that you led to be felt, or how you wanted them to feel being led by you, and what that kind of looked like. But I also know that you're coming in on almost a decade removed from being a full-time head coach, and I know you've been really active in that time since the retiring from coaching. So I'm just kind of curious, as a starting point, what's been most exciting about the current work that you're doing?
Well, for anyone who leaves something that they've done for a long time, my hope for them is that they put a little pre-thought into this step you're going to take, and you know what you want to take on next. And for me, it was kind of it was my opportunity to kind of jump into one of my passions, and that is not just learning, but also sharing the learning and sharing the experiences. Because really, you with the Diamondbacks and me in my career, we've actually had some experiences that other people are like really curious about and probably would want to be in our shoes. Not every day, because those shoes aren't as shiny as people think every day. But we're in the locker rooms. We're around what might some people might call, I don't know, celebrities, right? But we actually see what made them who they are. So my thing is, why would I just keep that in my head and only I know it and only I can learn from it? We go through life in, I think thirds, and the first two thirds of my life was kind of looking around, listening, learning, seeing how much I could absorb. And then the last third of my life is going to be about sharing those things that I was so fortunate to learn. So for me, I'm just living a passion of learning and curiosity that I can then share with others.
I love that, and I know we were fortunate to have a thin slice of that a couple of years ago when you got a chance to come visit us and spend some time at our complex, and I think it was very evident quickly how much of an open book you were and how willing you were to share not only the principles of success that I think you experience and have witnessed in your career, but you were very upfront and honest about some of the challenges and some of the failures that you've seen or experienced. And I know to this day, our manager still references anecdotes from his conversation with you. And so that legacy, I think that are leaving by now transitioning to sharing and teaching what you've learned after all these years is very much appreciated.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. And, when I was in the confines of your building, I left there saying to myself, this is a place I'd like to work because, sure, it was a growth mindset within the building, but it was almost a feeling or a vibe of insatiable curiosity as to what can we maybe insert or inserted in our ways as to what maybe the Boston Celtics did to get to the point where they were in the conversation and eventually won an NBA championship. Because we were the same way. We always wanted to study other successful organizations. And then once whatever we learned, we had to put it in our own world and in our own words, right? So it became very digestible for, in this case, the players. So, I want the listeners to understand, yeah, maybe I came and shared, but you guys also shared. And as you know, I'm a big note taker. So anyone who's listening, or if you're actually watching it, if I'm looking down, I'm probably taking a note about what Zach said, or jotting down a quick hit on, okay, I got to say this when he gets done asking his question. So I learned every bit as much as you guys did during that couple of days with you.
I think one of the sentiments that you're highlighting there that's really good is I've heard a while back that if you're trying to copy or other organizations house, but it's not really rooted or grounded in your why, your mission as an organization, then it leaves a gap. And I think those things have to be in alignment. And there is this borrowing, converting, curating, if you will, that you learn from other organizations, other leaders. And at the same time, it's finding a way to make that authentic to the people in your organization. And I certainly felt that with your conversations.
Yeah, I think if people read that it's not true to you, then it will be false to them. They'll sense your doubt, they'll sense your hesitation, they'll sense your lack of belief. Um, you know, uh, Whenever you learn something, I really believe it's incredibly important because there's two things going on in this world. All the books say knowledge acquisition, right? We got to acquire knowledge. But if that's the only thing we do, we're not going to be able to transmit and translate it to the people that we lead or the teams that we coach. So there's knowledge acquisition and the ultra important step of knowledge application. But before we can apply it properly, we have to put sustained thought to what it meant to us. Because when you hear someone come in and share maybe a multitude of things that help them become successful, if all you do is memorize, it won't come over as if you believed in it. So I always say we have a choice after maybe someone comes in and talks to us or we learn something from a book. We can either memorize or internalize. And internalize is simply putting sustained thought to it. What does it mean to me? What will it mean to the group that I'm coaching or leading? And how can I, through my word choice, relay this to our group so that not only that it is heard, It is also understood within the confines of our culture and the way we do things. And then it is ready to be acted, then it is accepted, and then it is ready to be acted upon. So, and I know that's how you guys work. There might be something I said when I was in there, and you guys have just expanded on and actually made it better. That's the good part about people coming in. I used to love it because they would spur some thoughts, even maybe to the nth degree of, they might have said A, but I interpret it, and all of a sudden I have C, D, E, and F that I've added to it, simply because they mentioned something that got my mind going. So suffice it to say, that was a long answer to a very short question.
No, it's great, and I love the distinction between memorizing and internalizing, and then to your point, that next step that comes with it, which is the acting upon what you're learning. You're not just absorbing, but you now, as we mentioned at the very beginning, like you've got decades now of being having been in the arena, coaching, leading, putting these principles and the things that you've learned over the course of so many different experiences, putting them into action. And so, with that, I'd actually be curious. You mentioned now being on this maybe back third of your career, but I kind of want to you mentally time travel back to the beginning piece of it, because this is a piece that I don't know that I've ever heard maybe explicitly from you, but what was your origin story when it came to coaching? Where did that begin?
Well, usually what I get asked is something about, like, tell us your coaching journey. And I'm not sure, I don't really ever think about the journey. I more think about it in terms of this is where I am today, and let's make sure it's not about like going somewhere, it's being really good here. And that's something I've just lived with my entire career. How it got into me and instilled in me, I'm not sure. But I always used to watch my dad kind of just, no matter how big or small a job was, he was, you could tell back then. I just thought, well, he's really concentrating on shoveling the snow off of this client's walkway. But in fact, he probably was where his feet were, as they say today, and that was his job at that time, so he's going to do it to his best of his ability. But my journey started, we had a mixed family where my natural mom had died, and my stepmom's husband had died, and those two met. And then she brought six in, we had three, and then they had one between them, so we had 10. So when you're in a family of 10, especially when you're towards the younger part of it, like, you don't get to say much, right? So I was probably more in my head thinking than I was expressing with words or even joining in on conversations. Because if all 12 people joined in on a conversation, one question would last about 9 days, right? So I figured, okay, I'm the one that'll just listen and learn. And that's where I think I started to get one of my life's philosophies, and that's this: to go through life with big eyes, big ears, and a small mouth. To look around and learn, to listen deeply and learn, and then to keep my mouth shut, because every time I speak, I already know that, right? So I already know what I know, and if all I know is what I know, I don't know enough. Like, I need to know what other people know, right? So then it became, okay, you got to go outside. You know how the parents shoo the kids outside, especially when you got 10 of them. Like, get out of here. Like, give us like 4 minutes of just silence in this house, right? Well, when I went out, I guess I must have picked up a basketball at some point. And then I guess I began to shoot it. I haven't really thought deeply about this. And then maybe it went in a couple of times, or it didn't go in a lot, and I challenged myself, no, I'm going to make sure this thing goes in. And then I found out that when I thought I was out there for 5 minutes, it was 2 hours. So probably deep down, that was saying to me, God, you really like this. So like became really liked became loved it became passionate about it. And then as my playing career, I had a very good high school career, very good college career. Played 1 year in what was an old professional league called the AABA, which for your listeners, the answer is no. It is not the equivalent of the NBA. It is definitely for players who can't make the NBA. And I was one of those guys. So eventually you put the ball down and it doesn't bounce back up. So what do you got left? So I loved the game so much, and I was asked by a coach at the University of Richmond, hey, could you mind helping us out a little bit as a graduate assistant? And we're just going to have you work with players to help their skills get better. Thoroughly enjoyed that because I got to see somebody go from unsure to kind of sure to pretty sure to I got this, right? And when you can see a kid get to I got this, I don't need you right now in this area. I have to come back to you, but right now, I'm good, right? That to me put a smile on my face, and I thought to myself, gosh, I can actually really, the leadership books today talk about influence, and some people even define leadership as influence. I personally do not keep it as that short-sighted. To me, there's two other I's that are heavily involved in effective leadership. Sure, you can influence, but I also wanted to impact and inspire. I wanted to inspire guys to maybe take their game to a new level because that will help in so many other areas of their life. Inspire guys to want to come out on the floor and practice on their own to get better. Because if you need someone there all the time, I don't think you can get to where you want to go in any aspect of life. And then I wanted to impact that. Me being in their lives meant something. It helped them. And sure, it maybe have influenced them, right? And we do have to influence as leaders. We have to influence to the point where we get people to believe in what we believe in. We have to influence them to possibly change their behaviors to get to where they want to go. We have to influence customers in the corporate world to not only think about, but actually purchase our product, right? So I get the influence part, but I don't want to just do that. I want to do the other two I's.
Mm. There's a lot we could, I think, dive in further to what you just shared. And specifically what I'd be curious about is when you think about those latter two, the impact and inspire, right? We know that success is rarely, if ever, a solo journey. So there's been people in your life, and you've already kind of maybe touched on some of them, who were important catalysts for you. But when it comes to shaping your coaching and leadership career and journey, who were those people that not just influenced you, but really impacted and inspired you?
Yeah, well, so many of these names, the listeners would not know, right? Which is fine. It doesn't matter. The celebrity status doesn't determine the impact. What they give of their mind, heart, and past experiences determine the impact, right? So, and it's just not people, right? Books have coached me and still do to this day. Coffee sessions like we had. I picked up stuff from you three that morning that you saw me writing things down. Whether you said it, Ken said it, Tori said it, who didn't matter. I didn't care where it came from. I just wanted to learn it, right? So some of my mentors are the written word, the books, the articles. Some of them are the YouTubes that I watch. I still watch YouTubes today, whether it be Nick Saban talking to a community group on leadership, or Pete Carroll up on the stage at USC. It doesn't matter, where. But there was my high school coach was very influential because he was the first one that showed me that, man, not only is it really cool, it's really effective if you actually sweat with your players. He would come out and be in the drills with us in the summertime. Right? And he was sweating too. So he didn't just invest his knowledge, he invested, in essence, his whole body. And then we came up with the term of players love coaches who sweat with them. Right? And not everybody can do that. Right? Because some of us, we have different body types, and maybe I have better knees than somebody else at my age, whatever. But people know whether you're actually in it with them. Right? So Dave Wiedemann, my high school coach, And he also taught me that uh, it's great if you play hard. It's also great if you play as a team. And it's also great if you know the game to make adjustments during the game. But guys, if somehow we can get all three together, we got a chance to do what we did, which was win a state championship, right? Because when I was coming up, I never felt I was as good as anybody else, so I was going to like out intensity them. It's all I knew. And unbeknownst to me, I actually had some skill too. And he's the one who kind of got me believing that, okay, you got your intensity, you play hard, you got your skill, so we cover that. Now let's start learning the game, because at your height, you're going to be a point guard. And that's a position that requires knowledge of game back in the day, you know. So there was that. There was guys like Lou Getz, the first guy I worked under. He taught me a lot about college basketball. There was a guy by the name of Hal Nunley, a Division III coach here in the state of Virginia, because I played at the University of Richmond. And I got to know him in the off season because I went and spoke at his camps, and then we'd go back in his office and just talk basketball. And he taught me something that's very powerful, that exists and really is important in any walk of life. And he said one day, he said, I want to tell you the four most important words in coaching and leadership. And I said, what are they? He said, well, they're going to be simple, but you got to understand, if you don't get this right, you're never going to get to where you want to go in coaching. I said, what are they, coach? And he said, I'll say it in words that maybe he didn't use, but darn, it ain't working. Just 4 words. Darn, it's not working. And his point to me was, you know, Kevin, I know that you're smart enough, you're going to have a plan for anything that you try and take on. But so is the other guy. And when his plan is a little bit better than your initial plan, what do? Darn, it's not working. A new plan. I adjust. And he said, coaching is a game of adjustments. And back then he said, if you can make the third adjustment, you're going to win most of your games. I go in with a plan, he goes in with an adjustment to my plan, right? So that's number 1. He makes an adjustment, number 2, I got to adjust back to that, number 3. If you can get to that level of adjustment, you got a shot at being a really good coach. Mm-hmm. So different things from different people. But some of your viewers or listeners may know this name, Jay Bilas. He's synonymous with college basketball on ESPN. And arguably is the voice of college basketball now that Dick Vitale is kind of, moving on. And Jay said something to me at maybe 15 years ago that has stuck with me. He said, Kevin, everyone you meet knows something you don't. So pay attention in case they mention that thing. And I was thinking to myself, well, I've never put it in those words, but I think that's been an ingredient of me being able to get to where I've gotten so far in life, is that these things I use a lot.
Yeah, it ties so well to you describing earlier, wanting to have, big ears and to listen first. And um, you mentioned at the beginning just the amount of curiosity that you felt in our building, and we certainly felt that from you, and you can still see it even in how you're talking right now. I'm curious. I want to kind of transition a little bit to, over the course of your coaching career, you begin to formulate this identity as a coach, and I think outside viewers and the media and everybody else, like we love to jump to the accolades, like we love to jump to the achievements and to describe, hey, this is Kevin Eastman, this is all the things he's accomplished, which are all certainly very meaningful and valuable. And I'm kind of curious, like if we stripped those things away for a moment, how would you describe who you were as a coach?
When I started,
Yeah, as you started, and that'll probably segue into maybe how that evolved as you continued.
yeah, I think when I start, see, all we have is the context of the people you study at the time of life that you're in. Hence, the coaches that that me as a young coach and all people my age looked up to, they were the hard disciplinarians back in the day. The my way or the highway, right? So, and they were actually some of the yellers and the screamers. So I kind of thought, okay, that's what you need to do, right? So that you can prove to your players that you have total control of anything and you know what you're talking about, because of course back in the day you knew that the louder you said it, the more you knew it. Well, in fact, that's not true. You could argue that the softer you say it, right, the more it's like, wow, that guy's confident. Well, I didn't know that back then. I didn't know about emotional intelligence. So arguably I had too much emotion and no intelligence. So I probably was the person they studied to come up with emotional intelligence. My wife will always say, people have no clue what you were like. Because, you come over as a white-haired guy, glasses, nice sweater, says some words that makes him sound smart. But I was kind of a little bit of a yeller and a screamer. Matter of fact, that's one of the reasons I got out of coaching. I did not like the person I was becoming when I did my self-reflection of what's going on here, right? So, okay, what becomes bigger? Staying in the game somehow, some way, or saying, no, that's for somebody else. Because I know that right now, if I stay in this game, I'm going to be like this, if not more, right? So I was probably that when I was young, but I was also good at things. I knew the game, right? I knew how to teach the game. I could break it down. I could create drills to get things taught the way we needed them taught. I had that part down. The part I didn't have down was the emotional part. And also, and this is where I kind of fast forward to today, if I were to go back today, I'd be studying people as much as I'd be studying plays, right? Because ultimately, as I learned in the NBA, and I learned a lot in the NBA, number one, you don't have to drop the F-bomb and raise your voice all the time to get guys to do. As a matter of fact, if you do that consistently, you're eventually going to be pushed out of the game because players aren't going to tolerate it, right? So I learned that. I also learned the ability to observe, to really observe your players. Body language, facial expressions. We also had this terminology within our coaching staff of, I know what he said, but what did he say? Right? I know what he said. Yeah, we had one young player who got interviewed after a game, and they were the news. The writer was asking him about Kevin Garnett and how he scored 39 or 40 points, and boy, he seemed to be open and took a lot of shots. And the young player said, "Yeah, Kevin does get to shoot a lot in our system." That's what he said. What he really said was, I wish they'd let me shoot a little bit more, and I'm a little bit upset right now because I don't get more shots because I'm pretty good too. So that's why I, as an assistant coach to Doc never read the newspapers. I felt it was incumbent upon me to read them so I could keep up with the vibe of what I think our players are thinking. And I could be wrong, but this is where I picked up something from Doc. If he kind of felt something was going wrong, but had no proof, he would always kind of like say something like this. And I ended up using it with players. If I read something in the paper, I would say, let's just say with you, Zach, I don't know if I'm right about this. I really don't. But this is what I feel, and this is what I'm kind of getting when I hear you talking. Now, you can correct me if I'm wrong. And when I asked Doc why he did that so much, he would say, even if I don't know, they think I know. Mm-hmm. And if there is something going on, maybe they'll pay a little more attention. Maybe I should stop doing that. But there were a number of times where the player said, well, this is, I never get to shoot. And then you go into having, to explain, okay, here's where we are, here's why. Because I think when you can bring in the why, right, it's so important. You have to have competence. They have to trust that you know what you're talking about. You've got to be trustworthy. Like, this is all about how do you create buy-in. You got to have competence. You got to be trustworthy, right? you have to, we always felt part of buy-in is you got to work hard too, because you're asking the players to work hard every day. They got to see the coaches working hard. And then the other one is sincerity. Like, who are you really in this for? For your benefit, so you get a raise in the next round of salaries for your coaching staff, or are you in it for me, right? But the big one was at the end, that fifth one, and that was, could you explain and answer the why? Because once that comes through, it's like, okay, that's when this statement comes from players. I get it. Now another statement after that might be, I don't agree with it. That's okay. Then we go in deeper into that conversation, right? So you have to have the answers before they ask the questions. And you know certain things are going to happen in a player-coach relationship. They might question their role. Okay, so you got to take that all the way through the conversation pieces. Well, here's why we gave you this role. Yeah, but I don't see why. Well, here's why, right? And so for each question they have, and you don't even know which ones they're going to, that's why we always say you have to put so much pre-thought into difficult conversations, especially, that you have to have the answers before they ask the questions. And that can only come with thinking about, we called it the what if exercise. I say this, what if he says this? Or maybe on the floor. We think the Diamondbacks are going to do this against us. Well, what if they do this? Well, then we're going to do this. Well, what if they now do this, right? Boy, you're getting me off on tangents, so keep me reeled in.
No, you're great. I think the thing that I liked about what you just shared is that you kind of, in a way, just demonstrated and showed us your evolution when it comes to that emotional intelligence. Like you mentioned that early on in your career, that was maybe not the quote unquote strength of yourself as a leader. However, what you're describing is the paying attention to body language, being really intentional with the communication, knowing the why, to get people to change. Like one of the things that we talk about internally is like when players know why they do something, or when you know the why behind what you do, it changes the quality of how you do it. And so that why piece being really important, but in order to do that, you certainly have to know the individual. You have to know what makes them tick. And I'm curious for you, what's been a moment in your coaching career where you look back on it and you think like that was when I really grew, not necessarily in skill, but maybe in that self-awareness or emotional intelligence?
I guess in the emotional intelligence, there was one point at which I was really getting on a player late in my career in college coaching, right? The good part about being an assistant coach in the NBA, you don't ever have to get on players really. That's up to the head coach. Like you actually you drive the ice cream truck a lot of times. It's the head coach that actually drives the bulldozer. And I joke there, but actually the reverse should be true for an assistant coach. We should have some bulldozers too, so that the head coach can kind of get a day off, right? I call it weeding the garden, right? We should be weeding the garden every day, getting them when they're that big, so we can pull them out. Not easy, but easier than that thing that grows up this big, and we got to get this big machine to come in, right? Because every assistant coach should understand this. Our head coaches that we work for, like in my case, Doc Rivers. Doc was at his best coaching when all he had to do was coach. He didn't have to worry about this little mini discipline. He didn't have to call this guy. We weeded the garden, right? So that gets me to, I have no idea what your original question was. I was going to try and fake it, like, okay, I was going to try and keep talking until I remembered it, but
That's
you
okay.
said tell the
That's
truth
okay.
on this.
Well, and if nothing comes to mind, I have a follow-up. But what's a
Oh, yes.
moment that when you think back to your coaching career where you felt like you did grow in terms of self-awareness, emotional intelligence? Does any particular moment or interaction come to mind?
Yeah, there was one time I was really getting on a player, okay, because that was one of my negatives. And it, 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 it wasn't personal in words, but I think it was received very, 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 very personally. And for some reason, my eyes caught on to like the look in his eyes, not so much his whole body, but it was like this, like self-defeating, like there, he has no belief in me. And I actually thought this guy was a very good player, and he was very valuable to us. So really, what I've done is taken a very valuable player and diminished him to the point where he had no belief in something I believed in that he could do, right? And it's a small little thing, but it really hit me because for some reason there was some transfer of something where, man, I got to stop doing this.
Mm.
Like this, forget about whether it helps winning or losing. And I don't want you to, your listeners to think, oh my gosh, he was yelling at players all the time. No, but when I did, I was a good yeller, right? When you talk about strengths you had, I was good. Even back in the day, I might be able to drop an F-bomb at the appropriate place, right? So that was one. But on the positive side, another one was a kid who we had mile times. And this was back when I was a college coach. And point guards had to run in this obviously quicker paced mile, small forwards, quicker pace, or a little bit longer time period. Anyway, he was a big guy, kind of real big muscles, like 0% body fat, right? One of those guys where if he brought his knee up too high on a sprint, it might split his skin. Like there was no body fat. So he knew he could never make his time. And one day he made his time and he was like hyperventilating, going over, and I walk over to him and I said, I knew you could do it. He said, how did you know? I never thought I could do this. And I think part of it was I knew he could, so I believed in him before he believed that he could do it. But number two, in the journey to get there, each step that was hard, he took a second off, a second and a half. Each step, I was there at 6 a.m. in the morning, right? So I invested my time, energy, effort, encouragement, sweat sometimes, to travel that path with him. And I think that's important. Not only, the four most important words you can say as a coach or a leader is, I believe in you. That's powerful, especially when it really looks like you. Okay, so in a leadership position, let's say, Zach, you're my leader and you're leading me, and you say something to me. I'm now quickly interpreting the following. I got to believe that you believe in what you say you believe in. And I think this kid believed that I believed that he could do that. But his body wasn't prepared to do it yet. Right? So I felt like to have him do it on his own, he will never get there. So I got to be there. Right? Encourage when encouraging is needed, push. Because no matter how you cut it, and I know people are all relationship oriented today, and be careful of what you say and what you do. Everyone who has gotten to a high level has been pushed, has been challenged, has had expectations put on them. Now, they're not always comfortable, but they are an ingredient to getting over a hump that a lot of people don't get over, right? Like, I got to believe that most of the players who make it in your sport have been pushed and challenged and still are at some point. So my point here is, if you really want to get somewhere, if there are some athletes listening to, or anyone really, if you really want to get somewhere, push, challenge, and expectations are actually positive words that are hard to do.
Mm. One of the things that I think you're offering a distinction around is in that moment, your ability to convey your belief in that player wasn't just through what you said, it's what they saw from you also. It's you showing up every single day, being there, and also modeling for them that belief and that trust and setting those expectations and things like that. And I think that's such an important piece of leadership that you talked about at the beginning, where players love coaches who sweat with them. And I think one of the adages that I've come to appreciate for me, and I don't know what your own feelings are around this, is that, before you can lead others, it's important that you lead yourself. And there's obviously a lot of layers to that, a lot of directions within that. But when you think about that sentiment of leading yourself before leading others, what comes to mind for you?
Well, I think I really like don't get what leading yourself means, but I do get this, and I think this is actually what they're saying. But I really study myself. Like I know myself, and more importantly, when it comes to leadership and maybe self leadership, I know the things. I call them GAPS, which is an acronym: Greater Awareness of Personal Shortcomings. I am aware of my shortcomings, right? So I've got to fill those gaps with maybe someone else, or fill those gaps with my own educational journey to learn that. So when I'm trying to learn who I am and know myself, I've already learned something from the emotional intelligence conversation we've had, right? Well, that takes place in everything. But more importantly, the two things I want to get at, because I do want you to be able to ask some other questions, because it seems like I'm going like 25 minutes on each question. But I want to know about what I don't know that I need to know to be an effective leader. So that may be an education process for me. I have to study it and think about it, ask other people who have been there. But I also want to know my demon triggers, right? That thing that I'm leading this group and somebody just like upsets you and you go into like, young Coach Eastman mode. Now, I never did that in leadership positions, but things that can really get you off track. Like, what are those triggers, right? Because I always try and catch myself. And as I got on, as I got older, this word, I don't even know if I've told my wife this, but anytime I got into that point where I'm about ready to like explode, I got to the point where I could always say the word, as it was a single word, and it was pause. I just said it in my own head, pause. That was my trigger to turn the switch of the other trigger off for a second. And then I quickly thought about those questions that you read about in the books, right? Does this need to be said by me? Does it need to be said like right now, right? Those were the two big ones, right? Does it even need to be said, right? That was the other one. So I quickly ran through those, and many times it allowed me to just like, okay, take a step back. Now, this whole process took about 6 seconds because I had ingrained it into my head, right? When I first started to try and learn this to help myself, because I self-evaluated and self-reflected, I actually did a little white index card that I had on my desk that had those 3 questions on it, because I saw it every day. And even though I maybe didn't consciously, intentionally like think about it every day, I saw it and I probably read it every day, and it stuck in, and then it became a habit. And I still do it to this day. Is it foolproof? No, because human beings are fools, right? We're fools, so nothing's foolproof. We all fall into fool territory or demon territory at some point.
That reflection exercise makes so much sense, especially when it comes to, potentially challenging conversations that you mentioned, or reflecting on interactions that you've had in a specific moment. And I'm curious, like on maybe a broader level for you, when it comes to filling those gaps, that greater awareness of personal shortcomings. What did your process look like maybe after a season when it came to maybe auditing yourself and identifying how you wanted to work on those gaps?
Well, first off, I understood, or I had to understand, that I was hired for a role. So I went back and looked at my role or your job description, right? I'm sure Tori has certain things under your pitching coach and your hitting coach and all that sort of stuff, even for you guys. So I looked at that, and then I tried to evaluate where was I in each of those areas. And it wasn't a one day, like 1 week thing, because I tried to, what I would do is actually on a yellow legal pad. I didn't really do the computer as much. I just wanted, because I wanted to write, when I write out things, it sticks more with me. So I took every part of my role and put it on one sheet of paper. And then for a couple of weeks, whatever I thought, good and bad, I put underneath that category. So that was number one in self-reflection. And some people might say, well, because I think you should do two things in life. And you and I have talked before, like the coffee and out in your facility. So you've probably heard me say this, but two things I think all of us need are to have truth tellers in our life, and number two, to do a truth audit. The truth audit is your self-reflection piece we're talking about. And some people, when I do talk about this in my talks around the country, both in corporate and sports, really, I consistently get this question. Well, I don't really know everything I'm not good at. That's where you need your truth tellers. But if it only comes from your truth tellers, I don't think you're reflecting deep enough, long enough, and with as much quality as you can, right? Because there has to be some things, and even if you have to do this, when something bugs you about something you did, write it down, because you'll forget it in 2 months. And at the end of the year, look at your bug list. The things I did that bugged me, right? Or Oprah Winfrey has this thing. She said this on our last show, take action on the things that whisper to you, right? Mm-hmm. So it might be, darn it, I should be better in those right after practice players upset, and I didn't really I didn't diffuse it properly. So I got to learn how, at the end of the season, if that whispered to me, I got to learn how to diffuse arguments or conflict or something. Right? Could be a pat on the back. Could be an arm around the shoulder. It could be a real hard truth. Hey, Zach, you know what Doc said? Like, I know you're upset, but it's true. It's true. And I'm coming at you as not upset at you at all. I'm coming at you as, I don't want you to be in this position again. But what he said, if you go home tonight, you know it's true. You know it's true. And if it isn't true, tomorrow come to me and said, Kevin, you lied to me. Right? So again, your questions are good. They get you into so many different things. Or my ability to answer is bad. I'm not sure which is true here. But whenever you're in those situations, you got to ask yourself two questions. Who and how? Who am I talking to? How should I talk to them? And then you have to be aware of the context, the environment, right? It may not be the right time because that flame is so hot inside Zach right now that the only thing I'm going to do is add to the fire. So you got to know all that stuff. Again, I have no idea what the question was, but it sounded like a good answer.
It did. It sounded like a great answer. Well, I think what you just shared ties so well to, you mentioned that one word that was almost like an anchor that you could use, that word pause, that allowed you to ask yourself, one, does this even need to be said? Does this need to be said by me? And then does it even need to be said by me right now? And that takes all these things that we've already talked about in this conversation, understanding the context, reading the body language, knowing not just what's being explicitly said, but what are they really trying to say, underneath all of that. And this wasn't maybe an avenue I was originally going to go, but I'm kind of curious because I think when you joined us a couple years ago and we spent a lot of time talking, I think this aspect of telling the truth really resonated for a lot of people. And I think you see a lot of great coaches out there in a lot of different settings talk about the importance of telling the truth. And yet it still gets brought up a lot. And I think part of that is because it, for whatever reason, can be challenging. From what you've seen or experienced, what makes telling the truth so challenging at times for leaders?
Because they're selfish. They only look at it through their lens. Oh, this is going to be hard for me. That's not why you tell someone the truth. You tell someone the truth so it will help them, not hard on you. Help them, not hard on you, right? So you can see I'm a little passionate about this. And it's not easy. I'm not saying this is easy. If it were easy, like everybody would be telling the truth. But I think it first has to start off with what is your culture about? Like if you played for a Doc Rivers team or organization, good or bad, you have to make that decision before you sign as a free agent. You know it is a truth culture. And you know that you will be told both truths. And I think that's important too, to keep track of our negative to positive ratio as a coach. And that is best kept track by someone else other than you, right? Because a lot of times we think what we said isn't negative, and yet you heard it, Zach, and you knew it was negative, right? All you're trying to do is change something so your team plays better, so you don't really think negative, positive. And we had that happen some in Boston, where our negative far outweighed our positive about with a Hall of Fame player, right? So I think it's this whole concept of truth. It has to be a part of your everyday existence. Does that mean you're looking to tell someone a hard truth every day? No. Most of the truths we told our guys were positive truths, but they're easy. It's not telling the truth that's hard. It's telling the hard truths that's hard. The easy truths are easy. Now, I would say to the coaches, find more opportunities to tell the easy truths. And sometimes I'll go up to a player so he'll know, A, that I think what he did was really good, but I'm also going to say to him, hey, help me here. So I might say to you, Zach, man, I can't believe you did that. How did you do that? Like, that's so positive. Like, tell me, like, it was great. I was hoping I could like even teach you that, but I didn't teach you that. Like, how did you do that? All of a sudden, that their chest goes out and they're going to tell you. Or, hey, I don't know how you did that, Zach, but I'm telling you what, when I work with John, he's going through some stuff right now, but if you can help me, or maybe come with me, but certainly I'll do it, but if you can tell me, like, how did you do that? Like, how did you get through that? Right? And then maybe it was a mental thing, maybe it was a physical thing, I don't know. But what I'm saying to you, I value your opinion. I value your intelligence. I see you more as just an athlete who is a robot who does A, B, and C because we've asked you to do that. So that's the how part, right? People always ask me like, well, we have this type of player, how would you talk to them? And I don't know, and because you may say that's what the player is, but when I go and get in front of them, you've misread. You've misread, right? And the only way, like, the best way to get, like, to change your behavior, I think I have this right. To change a behavior, you have to first change the way maybe someone thinks, or certainly that's one of the early steps. Well, to get him to even think, there has to be some like type of relationship. And I've heard you say, you said this earlier, we have to know what makes our players tick. And I think I said this when I was out there, but that's just one of three things we got to do if we want to get our message across. Tick is important, there's no question. But I could argue, and sometimes do, that that's third on the list. So if that's third, it begs the question, what's numbers 1 and 2? And I believe number 1 is not so much what makes them tick, although that's important, but what makes them talk. Because if I can get them to talk, I'll find out to a greater depth and degree, I think, about what's making them tick. If I do know this, I don't know exactly how you coach baseball, but I do know this, if all your coaching is based on guesswork, it ain't gonna work. Why guess what a player's thinking? Try and get them to talk. How do you do that? Develop a relationship. And not so much what makes them tick, but what makes them listen. Because if I can get them to listen, I might be able to change the way they tick, right? So those three to us are all hand in hand. It's not just what makes them tick, because what makes them tick might tell me the who and how, but I got to get them to talk to me to even find out. Then I don't have to guess. Now, does it work in every time? No, right? That's why coaching and leadership is hard, because people are people. They hide things. They're embarrassed about things. But if I do know this, the best way to get to their head is through their heart. If you can get a piece of their heart, who tells you the most inside stuff? Our wives, our best friends. Why? Because they have a little piece of your heart. They know a little bit about your story that maybe someone else doesn't. And when stories get to be known, you many times what I have found is there's some shared things in those stories, and the more it's shared, the more we get to do. Or that like there's the starting lineup for our team, but it's not a championship team until it's that. That's where the power is. If I poked every one of your listeners like this with my fingers, because that's the way we are at the beginning of the year. This guy's going this way, this guy's going this way, this guy's going this way, this guy's way off over here. And as we start to do this, how do we do this? Getting him to talk, getting him to listen, right? That's the study of people. Remember I answered one of the questions that I would probably study people more? I didn't. I just tried to drive them harder. And I wasn't driving. Many times we think we're driving him harder. We're actually driving him under. And we got to be careful.
Mm, mm. I'm so
And let me
glad
say
that
this
you,
too. Let me say this too. You
yeah,
have this ability, like, so I give an answer, and then you have this ability to extrapolate, which I think is very unique. I wish I actually had this. Very quickly, like what I said in like 6 words, or you can categorize it in this area. So, boy, I commend you on that.
oh
I
no,
always think it was the lesson, but you have a way of figuring out like a category, or you can bring it back to something else. So, well done.
oh no. Well, I mean, you honestly, I don't think you make it difficult. I know you said you feel like you're maybe going in a lot of directions, but there's the challenge is I think there's so many avenues, even through what you've shared already, that we could continue to dive into. And I'm so glad that you picked up on that breadcrumb earlier with the tick, because I was really hoping that you would talk about that. I will say this for me personally, that distinction that you shared a few years ago around, tick being number 3. Let's start with what gets them to talk and then what gets them to listen. That to me is so profound and so simple. And yet, when you really start to use that as a framework for how you connect with somebody, you do start to uncover how they think, why they think the way they do, and so many things. And I think the other thing that you just touched on too is, trying to get a piece of someone's heart. And I think that ties actually really well to the advice that you heard early on, and leadership's not just influence, it's about impact and inspiration. And to me, you don't get to the latter, you don't get to inspiration without a piece of the heart. And that's just such a really nice connection and bridge. So I'm really glad it's kind of coming full circle in the conversation. And there's a part of me that wants to keep going down this road. And I'm also thinking about, while I have you, just some of the experiences that you can bring that I think are unique. And I think one thing that your background is a really healthy balance of not only having been a head coach, but also an assistant coach. And you've kind of already talked a little bit about the parallels there, and how you approached that role. But I would be curious maybe if you expanded a little bit when you think about being a quality assistant coach. Um, what does that look like for you?
Well, number one, it gets back to that role thing. Understand it, accept it, execute it, and try and improve upon it. So that's number one. Just making sure, do your job. The old Bill Belichick, New England Patriots philosophy. Do your job. And we added to it. We actually added a word. We said, do your job completely. Completely. Right? Don't do somebody else's job. Just do your job right now. If someone else needs help, fine. But do your job. I think in today's world, being an assistant coach, you have to be you should study problem solving and difficult conversations, because we should take those on, I believe, at a higher rate than the head coach does. Because then the head coach can worry about like coaching the team. Because the last I looked, I think that's what they get paid for. Like coach our team to win games, right? But they're always having to, we only have so much mind space, M-I-N-D. And if 80% of Doc Rivers' mind could be concentrating each and every day on just making our team better, that's, and then we got to fight to try and get it to 87%, right? So I remember we used to go in from time to time, not every day. I don't want it to seem like that, but go in to Doc's office, and I would say to him, what can I take off your desk? What's something that really you don't have to do, but someone gave it to you to do that I could do? And trust me, Doc, if I need your help, I'll come back in, right? So that his desk is clean, to concentrate on game prep, to concentrate on maybe a player he has to talk to today and what he feels are the 3 bullet points he needs to really hammer home with that player, whatever those things are, right? So that would be another aspect of leadership, right, is to lighten the load, because, our roles are different as assistant coaches, but our job is the same. Our roles are hitting coach, pitching coach, base running coach, shooting coach, free throw shooting coach. Those are our roles, but our job, help Doc Rivers win games. That's our job. Do everything within our power to help him win games. What's within our power? Talking to players, keeping a vibe on the locker room as best you can. Watching players, okay, who's up, who's down today, right? How can I avoid them doing something in, say, this practice session that would take everybody's mind off, like everybody goes crazy, okay? So I try to really get better each and every day at reading our players coming into the practice facility. How do you get the fence sitters off the fence? Like, everybody wants to work with the guy who wants to work every day. There are those guys which I used to call before yous. They get there before the coach. Where were you, coach? I thought we were working out. There are those guys who get there on time. There are the fence sitters who they're sitting on the fence. If you don't come and ask them to work out, they'll eventually get off the fence and go back to the locker room and go home. And there's the never shows, right? If you can get the never shows and the fence sitters, and how do you do that? Relationships, explaining why, talking about their career. You mentioned earlier about the word truth. I would go through an exercise of questioning with players. Hey, I just did this, I'm not going to name the team, it was an NFL team. Sat down with their head coach for 4 hours on Monday or something like that, earlier this week. And he was asking how can we get these guys to really get into skill development? I said, well, I don't know if this will. It helped us, and it helped me in particular because I was in charge of skill development at some of the places. And I would say, okay, do you think if we came back at the same level we played at last year, or you played at individually last year, we could make a jump in the standings or be even better this year? They all answered no, right? Well, do you think skill development can help us get there? Yeah, everyone answers yes. Really, you're kind of leading them along, right? Taking that horse to water, right? And then how important? And they'll usually extrapolate a little bit about, it's really important because if I improve my skills and Zach improved his skills, that's 2 out of our starting 5, so we should be better. It keeps going, right? And then I say, okay, so would you agree that at some point during your development of skills, you probably need to know where you are? Oh, of course. So really what we're talking about here is you need to hear the truth? Yeah. Now, do you want me to tell you the truth? And this is how I say it with this body language, these hands. Do you want me to tell you the truth? Of course I do. And in the off season, they all do. And then this is the big question. No. And I asked that a couple of times. Are you sure you want me to tell you the truth? Yeah. Are you sure? Coach, I'm sure. Quit asking me that. And I said, well, I got one more question. What is it? What, you want to ask me, do I want to take the truth again? No. I'm going to ask you this. Are you willing to hear the truth when you're pissed off at me for pissing you off? And they always say, yeah. I said, okay, let's review. Do you want to hear the truth? Yeah, I want to hear the truth. No, no, no. Do you want to hear the truth? Yeah, I want to hear the truth. Do you want to hear the? I want to ingrain it in their head, this conversation. It's going to be hard for them to forget this conversation because I've asked them, do you want to hear the truth like 70 times? But it's the big one at the end. When you're upset with me, with your circumstances, with the head coach, do you still want to hear the truth? Because if you do, now I set the guidelines of the truth. It's only going to really be the truth. I'm not going to try and lie to you to get you to do something, right? I'm not going to do that. Number two, I am going to deliver every truth with respect and the two most important things I can give you as a coach. And they're 2 4-letter words. You know, they always think it's the F-bomb, right? Because that's what coaches say a lot. No. Those 2 4-letter words are TIME and CARE. I'm going to spend the time with you to get you to where you want to go. And I'm going to care about your career, right? And people can say, well, you're probably caring about my career. No, my career will be taken care of by your career being taken care of, right? If everybody on our team gets better. Now, some rules that we talk about with the whole group, we get them together and, okay, we've all agreed that the truth is important. Are we willing to hold each other accountable to that? Because we can't be there every day. They all say yes. Then we put in the rule. You cannot hold a teammate accountable for something that you're not doing to the best of your ability each and every day yourself. If you're not, you're not allowed to hold anybody accountable. Nope, can't do it. Not allowed to do it. But we had that conversation, right? Because that's a big part of an assistant coach's job, I think, right? So it's those types of things, bringing energy. It's sometimes as an assistant coach, it's not always what you know, it's what you bring that day. Do you bring a positivity? Do you bring an energy? Do you bring a TIME? Do you bring a CARE attitude, right? Or are you that negative guy all the time, right? So attitude you bring, knowledge you have, the ability to take some load off the head coach, executing and understanding and accepting your role. These are all parts of being a good assistant coach. Relationship building, hard conversation ability, accountability, holding ability, right?
The weeding that you talked about earlier, right?
Yeah,
Like weeding the garden, all those things. Yeah. Um,
yeah,
the the point that I wanted to maybe highlight that you shared that I think is really powerful, given that you mentioned that interaction about really ensuring that that player not only wanted the truth but was willing to hear it. I think, earlier in the conversation, we were talking about expectations, and I agree with you that sometimes it has a negative connotation, or it can at times. However, it can be a performance enhancer too. High expectations and challenge is unbelievably valuable to create an environment where people are stretched and can thrive. Um, and the thing that I think is important too is sometimes I think there's a difference between expectations and agreements. And I think one of the things that you're highlighting in that conversation is you didn't just set an expectation with that particular player that you were going to tell them the truth and ensure that they wanted it. You got them to agree that they wanted to hear it. And it was no longer just a one directional expectation, it was a shared mutual agreement. And I think that that's just a really powerful distinction that you eloquently walked me through.
yeah. Bill Russell came in. Bill Russell, for those who don't know basketball, is one of the greatest players ever to play. An older Boston Celtic guy. Bunch of championships. Doesn't have enough fingers even for the rings. So he once told one of our leaders that there's 3 ways to lead. You can get out in front and pull them with you. You can get behind them and push them forward, and you need to do this a little bit of that throughout the course of a year. But the most powerful one is when you get shoulder to shoulder, put your arm around that person and walk with them. And that's what you're talking about here. That's the visual example of the expectations and the agreement working hand in hand. Because that's why people feel the pressure when the expectations are only emphasized, delivered, and agreed upon from one side, right? We all know if we have a little bit of a stake in ownership of something, we are likely to give a little bit more of ourselves. We still need to be pushed and challenged because human nature usually ends up being human nature, right? So, and the thing I say to players sometimes is, why do you stretch before practice? Well, I just feel like I'm limber and ready to go, and I feel a little bit better ready to go into practice. That's what expectations are. They stretch you. They get you to the point where you're able to give more and eventually become more, right? Because everyone sees expectations as this negative thing. And really what expectations are, if there was proper pre-thought to the expectations, right? Like if I put an expectation on Wendy, my wife, saying by next week you have to run a marathon at the fastest time a woman's ever run the marathon. No way, right? So the expectation has to be realistic. But if it is realistic, it's not an expectation. It's an I believe in you statement. I believe you can get here. Like I'm believing you can get there before you believe. That guy who didn't run the mile, that was an expectation. The time was the expectation. But it really, to me, was a belief that you can do this. Now, because expectations are going to be hard, I think you as the leader, you as the coach, should be there during the journey. Not every day, because a coach is supposed to help you get there, not do things for you, right? So, because the only way to get there is to make sure that you put your body into that position and you've done enough reps, either mentally or physically, that once you're there, like they say, next man up. How dumb is that? I don't want next man up. Anyone can get up. This guy walking on the street outside of my home office here, he can actually get up off of a bench and get ready to go in a game. I want next guy prepared, not next man up. Because everybody who has an injury and the guy comes in and does well and helps the team win, or maybe even has to play a whole bunch of games, it's not next man up. That was next man prepared. Not next man ready. Anybody's ready. What's ready defined as? Kev, you ready to go in the game? Yeah. Take off my warm-ups, stand up. I know, gosh, I've been here enough to the Celtics, the Boston Garden. I know where to check in. Yeah, I'm ready. Are you prepared? Do you know our pick and roll coverage? Do you know our adjustment? Do you know your guys' tendencies? Do you know what we just called the play in the huddle? Right? That's prepared. We want next man prepared, not next man up. So, but I think so much of it is you can't get guys to agree with everything you say, but you have to give them the opportunity to see things, number one, the way you see them, and number two, that it actually, like, everything a coach says doesn't have to automatically go into the negative box and then work its way to positive, right? Some of it is as you deliver the message, you talk about the why, give them a chance to say, no, I don't, like, Rajon Rondo was the ultimate challenger. Why can't I just do this? Okay? Well, you had to have an answer for that. Like, whenever you worked out with him, you didn't just prepare your drills. You prepared for questions that would be asked because they might be more important than the drill work you were doing, right? So that's the who and the how. When you work out with Ray Allen, this is one of the things I was telling the NFL team the other day. You got to go back and evaluate, like, all these things we're talking about. You don't have to worry about any of them with Kevin Garnett. He can do everything a coach wants him to do because he just does it. But it's those guys who impact winning that are not the Kevin Garnetts, and on a basketball team it might be three. Might be three guys that are either fence sitters, dragouts, or never shows. Those are the guys, like, if they matter, you got to get it right. Like anything in the organization that matters, you got to get it right. Like if your hitting coach matters, you got to get that hire right. You might be able to get the assistant turning first base corner coach. You might be able to get that one wrong because the head assistant turning first base coach, you got to get that one right. So whatever matters, this is one thing I was telling the coaches. Who really matters that isn't like fitting the description of like a good skill development player, like a guy who's bought in? Well, it's these three guys. Okay, then everything we talk about today, it's geared to those three guys. Now, some of it you may have to use with one of the guys above, but for the most part, those three guys, you got to get them from here to here, right? So it's knowing your team. Like, that's why, like another part of the assistant coaches, like who and how, like who are they? Like how do we address the challenges that they are putting, talk about challenges that we put on them, they put challenges on us, right? Teach me better, get me off the fence. Well, they shouldn't be in the pros if they're sitting on the fence. Well, guess what? There's some that sit on the fence. There shouldn't, some people sit on the fence in your office, right? So, well, you got me going on that one.
I mean, yet again, there's multiple avenues I would love to go, and I want to be, sensitive to your time. This has been a really great conversation. I have a couple, I think, final questions that I'd love to ask. One is a little bit of a follow-up to what you just spoke about, because on one hand, you talked about expectations and the pressure too that can come with that, or what can be felt from that. And I think one aspect of this is we've talked about that a lot in the form with players, but I would be curious for you, what helped you manage and navigate not just the expectations, but the pressures and the real, like the toll that being a coach at the highest level demands. What kind of helped you manage those aspects of coaching?
Well, I don't know that I ever managed them well, quite frankly, because when I was in college coaching, when I was a head coach, we didn't have your guys' positions back then. They just didn't exist, right? And that's where, as a coach, at some point you got to say, look, this is beyond my scope of knowledge. I need help here, right? I may be able to stop this for a day or two, but it's going to come back. So that's when we need the performance coaches, the mental coach. So I think there's an understanding of when no, this is not something you deal with. Somebody else who knows this stuff has to deal with it and has studied this stuff. So for me, like as a head coach, I put so much pressure on myself to do well, right? And then sometimes when you do that, it gets you make it personal. Like every mistake is yours, and then it starts building, right? Instead of having three suitcases, I used to do this in coaching clinics. I would have like 20 suitcases, right? And I would have a person start walking across the floor, or and then we start putting suitcases, and they hold them, and all of a sudden, that's the weight that eventually builds on you if you don't have an outlet, right? So, the only thing I used was win, and win gave relief, not joy. It gave that's when you know you should probably get out of it. If it's just, we won, rather than celebrating it with the guys, or maybe some guy did an unbelievable job for us. You say it for 3 sentences in the locker room after the game. No, do more than that. Go up, hug them, right? So I would be a much better, well, I don't know. The players would enjoy being coached by me much more today, right? Because I've learned you didn't have to be who I was, right? So, but I probably, thinking back on a head coach, the one thing I probably would have done that I think would have helped is kind of what Coach K did. He had his whole family immersed in the program, right? And I don't know why, you probably do. I don't get it, but they are. Women see things men don't see. They feel things men don't feel. They read body language way better than us for some reason. So she probably could have helped me a lot on and she's a truth teller. Hey man, you can't how would you like if they did that to Jake? Oh yeah, I never thought of that. Our son. Never really thought of that. So maybe having her involved would have helped me. I didn't have truth tellers back then, and I think my assistants were probably a little bit of because I was so intense. They were probably scared, and I didn't even know it, right? So probably some of those things, and I wish I had searched out because back in my day it was kind of the Bobby Knights, which was drive, drive, drive. It wasn't the say maybe, and Coach K drives, but as he got older, he was more relationship oriented. Like relationships, I never heard that word, right? So if you don't hear it, why would you probably even think of it, let alone think it could help? So I would probably say some of those things, but I'm not a good person to ask, how did you manage? Because that's why I'm sitting here today. I didn't manage it, right? It's what drove me out. I did not like the person I was becoming. But I was smart enough to know I was dumb enough to coach that way.
Mm.
So, and I also knew kind of what I was going to do next. I kind of enjoyed speaking and I kind of enjoyed teaching the game. So I first got into doing skill development clinics throughout the country and doing things for Nike. And then that got me into some speaking engagements. I like those. And now, that takes up a good portion of my year.
Mhm. Appreciate your honesty in that. And it's funny, I've now interviewed, a handful of different people, different coaches for this first season. And I think there's been a common pattern in almost all of them of having referenced their spouse at some point in the conversation and just the role that they certainly play. And so it certainly reminds me one of the best pieces of advice I felt like I got. This was back before I transitioned even into the professional baseball sphere was you want to make sure that you marry up for sure. You want to make sure that you find somebody who is ready to be with you along that journey and just how important that person is, not just for your well-being at home, but also again how they support you through um, your profession. And it almost, as you were talking, I was like, it'd be an interesting season is to almost interview spouses of coaches, and just it would be, I mean, what a
Maybe a lot of
unique
secrets told.
perspective. And then we could compare and contrast the two.
Well,
This is
so
what they said, this is what the reality is.
you talked to Chris Peterson, right?
Yeah,
Did he talk about his conversation with his wife?
he did. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so powerful, right?
So good.
And
So
that
good.
I don't know if he did he get into societal pressure versus the comparisons.
Yeah, he did. He did.
Unbelievable stuff.
One of the lines too he shared that has resonated with a number of our coaches is how unfortunately easy it is for some to go home and then they just dump out all their trash on the table for their spouse. And just like how often that happens versus coming home and getting to a point where when you walk in, you can be fully present and leave. And again, it goes to what you said, that it's easy to say, it's not easy to do, but that has been a common theme amongst all of us, all of you that I've spoken with. And that kind of brings me maybe to this last question that I'd love to ask, and it's a question I'll ask every guest, just because I'm always really intrigued by what responses come of it. But you've done a lot as a coach. You've also done a lot of things beyond just being a coach too. So I'm curious, you can take this in whatever direction of your life you'd like, but what's something that you're proud of that maybe you don't normally get an excuse to talk about?
You know, my first reaction when you ask that is, I think like self pride is enough for me, self awareness is enough for me that I don't really need to talk about anything else. Um, and even though I do play the comparison game, probably, even though I'm told not to, I think probably everybody does at some point. I try and play it to not so much where do I stack up against that person, but what are they doing that I'm not doing that I should be doing? It gets back to the leadership thing of one of the things of, you know, I need to know what I don't know to get to where I want to go. So, you know, I don't really, I guess I want some of the outside pats on the back by letting people know I did this. Uh, but, you know, people will always say to me, well, you don't tell everybody, like, I didn't even know you were speaking. You don't like do it on Twitter or Instagram or all that. I don't, I just need to know that the person I went to or the team I went to or the organization, I don't know, sends me an email at some point saying, hey, that was really good, right? That was enough. So um, maybe I should say it's too late, but I finally accepted that my wife Wendy is actually really smart. And I would actually be the best coach in the NBA right now had I listened to her. No, I don't know, Zach. There's certain things. Remember, we were talking about some certain questions that my mind just never goes there.
Hmm.
So I don't know how to answer those. So I don't know.
That's totally fine. That's totally fine. No, I think it's a good culmination to the conversation of just like I mentioned at the beginning a couple of the things that I've really grown to admire about you in the last few years of having to get to know you and having these conversations. But the other one is humility, and I know I actually have your book next to me here, Why the Best Are the Best, and it's still one of my I think favorites that I often recommend to coaches and practitioners and leaders. But there's a whole segment and a lot of references in there into that humility. And I think in this conversation, again, your humility certainly comes through and is felt. So I just want to kind of conclude this with just, again, a massive thank you for taking some time to dive into some of these topics, some of which I know we've exchanged about in the past, and some of them have been new. And it's been
Yeah.
fun to see the tangents and the rabbit holes that we've gone down. So thank you.
Yeah, well, I definitely did both of those really well. Went off on tangents and went down rabbit holes. Um,
Those are
so
often the best, though.
yeah, but you know, you mentioned humility, and I don't like, I don't. It's just like I just am who I am. Um, but I do know this. People often say, "Well, Kevin, you know, you've accomplished a lot, but you seem to be so humble about it." And that probably went back to my roots of, okay, you know, why would, you know, this little kid from Haddonfield, New Jersey, like how did this happen? So being appreciative of each step, um, and those people who helped you get there, even the ones that you don't even know helped you get there. Someone who might have said something to someone else without you even knowing that now planted a seed in that person's head that, wow, Kevin is like, even in speaking, you should bring him in. There's times where I'll ask people and they say, oh, well, someone in the crowd over in Barcelona heard you speak and we were looking for a speaker and boom. So you never know, right? So be appreciative of everyone who enters your life and even those that don't. Um, and be appreciative that there are people listening, right? Because you never know when they're going to help. But it gets to the point of this. When we go back to the topic of leadership, humility is a separator. It really is. You mean you got to create the vision, and you have to have the goals and the metrics and all those things, and you have to be able to adapt and adjust to the environment and the changing times, and all that are in the books. But as you may have heard me say, I have this thing called leadership Velcro, and sometimes leaders will be going here, and their team's going this way. Right? There's a disconnect. Sometimes the leader is there, and the guys they're following, but they're a little further behind. Those successful organizations, there's the leader, and boom, like they're wherever the leader goes, man, I'm following because I believe in that leader. And humility is one of the pieces, like the ingredients of leadership Velcro. How do you get people to really get there and really follow you closely? Because you're only as good as the people doing the work, right? Like it's not always just about you. It's the ability of the people to assign them the proper work, and they do that work. And humility is one of those ways where you can be a little bit different in a very positive way. Humility has an incredible effect, which I have found just in my own life, on people. Vulnerability has an incredible effect on people to get them to first maybe like you a little bit. Then when they like you, they're probably going to find out a little bit more about you. Then they trust you. Then they respect you. And wow, if you get those three things, like, trust, and respect, you're in a pretty good position to lead and to get people to follow your leadership. So I kind of ended on that thought because you brought up the word humility.
No, that's a perfect thought. It again, I think it brings it all together. I know you've shared in the past that there's a difference between being a learn it all and a know it all, and how much you've wanted to err on the former. And I think again that doesn't happen without that humility and that curiosity. So I'm just really grateful. You mentioned this last kind of or this uh, next third of your professional life being this space of sharing all the things that you've learned. And so I'm really grateful for you taking the last, hour and a half or so to continue that with our listeners.
Well, here's an episode for you. Uh, a visit with Kevin Eastman. I know what he said, but what did he say? So you can unpack it.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Well, I mean, I'm gonna do that in general just because I want to go back through because I know that there's nuggets and breadcrumbs that you left in there that I couldn't keep up with. So very appreciative. I think this is gonna be the type of episode that those that are listening. Um, I usually am the type, I will be honest, I listen to most podcasts on time and a half speed. I like to be quick with my time. I would say this is probably an episode to maybe slow it down to make sure you don't miss anything because I think you dropped a lot of great nuggets. So thank you.
Okay. Well, tell everybody out there with the Diamondbacks I said hi.
Yeah, I will for sure, Kevin.
And
Yes.
if I
Thank
get
you
out
so
that way, I'll call you guys, and maybe I can watch you guys play a 9 inning game.
Yeah, we'd love that. Yeah, we'll do coffee again too. So thank you again.
All right. Thanks, Zach.
Yep.